For more on the brewing scandals in the Capitol, I'm joined by our friend David Pakman, host of the David Pakman Show. He comes to us tonight from Springfield, Massachusetts. David, as always, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Republican legislators, David, legislators like Darrell Issa spend more of their time scandal hyping than legislating. But could their focus on oversight actually backfire?
Yeah, it totally could. I mean, if you look at the latest polls, we now have these three kind of pseudo scandals, right? The IRS, the AP Department of Justice, and Benghazi. President Obama's approval rating actually went up 2 points, and Republican approval rating is lower than ever. So it could backfire. It's probably backfiring now. But that doesn't mean it's not a legitimate investigation into whether it's the IRS or AP or whatever the case may be. We just have to remember that just because there's an investigation and just because there's something to investigate, it doesn't mean President Obama was on his BlackBerry, as Glenn Beck suggested, making the phone calls, making these things happen.
Right. I think our idea of what the president is doing in his time is so different from what the president actually does with his time and how close he gets to so much of this stuff. On Meet the Press yesterday, Mike Rogers, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, put all of these competing D.C. controversies into perspective. Take a listen with me to Congressman Rogers.
When you look at the IRS and you look at the Benghazi issue and you look at the AP issue, I think the trouble here isn't even the individual specific scandals. It's this broader notion that there's a pattern of this activity. I think that's what concerns people, because what you don't want to have happen is Americans lose faith and trust in their institutions. That, I think, is what's at risk here.
So, David, has the Obama administration done enough to regain the public's trust in the IRS and the Justice Department? And if not, what more needs to be done?
Well, when you listen to that quote, what's missing there is that the pattern that is being identified is a pattern that's being identified by those who specifically wanted to create it, right? So when we actually look at these issues individually and separately, there's very little connection to President Obama. So I actually reject the idea that the pattern exists. The pattern exists insofar as those individuals want us to see it. So whether the President Obama has or hasn't done enough, he's answered questions about all of these issues. He's said, like any other president has said in the past in similar situations, that he'll investigate it, and that if there are individuals that need to be held responsible, they will be. I don't think that the standard to which President Obama needs to be held should be different because a group of politicians wants us to see a pattern that they created.
That's a great point. I mean, who are we listening to? You know, that's such a good point, David. Just because they're saying that there's a pattern doesn't mean that we have to look at the president in a different way. I totally agree. Now let's go to another scandal. There's a chorus calling for Attorney General Eric Holder's resignation. It's getting louder. New York's Peter King was on Fox News today, Congressman, saying that if he was Holder, he'd resign. Would Holder's resignation restore faith in the DOJ, or would it actually show weakness on the part of the White House and the Justice Department?
I don't think it's clear that it would do either. We won't know that until we know more. I think it's really funny that Peter King says if he were Eric Holder, he would resign. We all know that if he were Eric Holder, he would say resigning would send the wrong message, which is always the line when it's you that the resignation is about. So I don't think we should be listening too much to what Peter King says he would do.
Yeah, you know, I want to turn to another leak controversy, and this is a story that I know that you've covered on the David Pakman Show a lot. Today's the first day of the Bradley Manning trial. He faces charges of aiding the enemy by downloading hundreds of thousands of classified documents to WikiLeaks. What sort of precedent could his trial set for national security and for freedom of speech?
It would be huge. I mean, that's really why this is getting the attention it's getting, because of the precedent-setting nature of it. Tomorrow, I'm going to interview Kevin Gottstola from Fire Dog Lake, who's been covering this from the very beginning. He's at the trial, and I think the exact issue we should be looking at here is precedent. I mean, Bradley Manning has already admitted that he did just a lot of what he's accused of doing. Really, the issue is what should the penalty be, and also how has he been treated for the last few years since he was identified as the leaker. And also remember that Julian Assange, who for a while was kind of the focus of most of the attention, nobody's talking about him anymore. He's doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And we also have to look at kind of the interplay between Manning and Assange, not suggesting by any means that Assange should be charged with anything, but he's almost been forgotten in this kind of rush to prosecute and persecute Bradley Manning.
If you're not watching the David Pakman Show, you're obviously now missing a lot. David Pakman, look for that show. David Pakman, thanks for being here on the show. As always, look forward to the next time. We will be right back.